Single dad hired a nanny for his blind date, then realized she was the woman he came to meet. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Graham Hayes was standing in his kitchen in Seattle on a Friday afternoon at 3:30, staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him, and his sister Paige was on the other end of the call, refusing to take no for an answer about this blind date situation she'd gotten him into without his permission. The problem was Graham had explicitly told Paige he wasn't ready to date. He'd been a widower for 3 years, and between his job as an insurance adjuster and raising his 5-year-old daughter Natalie, he barely had time to sleep, let alone navigate the awkward disaster of modern dating. But Paige had apparently taken it upon herself to sign him up for some community center program called the Single Parent Mixer, where they match people based on compatibility questionnaires. And now Graham had a confirmed date for tonight at 5 and absolutely no childcare because his mom Linda was out of town visiting his aunt. Paige, I can't just leave Natalie alone for 2 hours. She's 5. That's literally illegal and also terrible parenting, Graham said while watching Natalie build an elaborate tower out of blocks in the living room. Paige sighed on the other end, like Graham was being deliberately difficult. That's why I'm calling. There's this app called Neighbor Nanny. You can book someone for a few hours. It's totally vetted and safe. Just download it and find someone for tonight. The date is at Rainline Espresso at 5, and Denise already confirmed with your match that you're coming, so you can't bail now. Graham wanted to argue that he absolutely could bail and probably should, but Natalie looked up at him in that moment with her mom's eyes, and he thought about how he'd been using her as an excuse to avoid living his own life for 3 years, so he downloaded the app and started scrolling through available sitters. He found someone named Alana who had perfect reviews and availability for that evening, sent a booking request, and got an immediate confirmation that she'd be there at 4:30, which gave Graham exactly 30 minutes to shower and pretend he knew how to dress for a date. Alana showed up right on time, knocked on the door with this friendly smile, and Graham opened it to find a woman, probably early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater that had paint stains on the sleeve. "Hi, you must be Graham. I'm Alana. Excited to hang out with Natalie tonight," she said, and her voice was warm and genuine. And when Natalie came running to the door to see who was there, she didn't do her usual shy hiding thing. She just said, "Hi, I'm Natalie and I'm building the tallest tower in the world. Do you want to help?" Graham gave Alana a quick rundown of Natalie's bedtime routine, even though she wouldn't need it since he'd only be gone 2 hours, showed her where the snacks were, and tried not to feel like a terrible dad for leaving his daughter with a stranger so he could go on a date he didn't even want. Alana seemed completely unfazed and was already on the floor helping Natalie add blocks to her tower, and Graham heard her say, "Okay, but if we're building the tallest tower in the world, we need a flag at the top. Should we make one?" And Natalie's excited shriek made him feel slightly better about the whole situation. He drove to Rainline Espresso, which was this covered outdoor patio cafe near the waterfront that was known for displaying local kids' artwork on the interior walls. And Graham had taken Natalie there a few times because she loved seeing other kids' drawings, and the hot cocoa was legitimately the best in Seattle. The cafe was moderately busy for a Friday evening, and the typical Seattle drizzle was starting. That light mist that's not quite rain but definitely gets you wet if you stand in it long enough. And Graham grabbed a table on the covered patio where he could see inside through the windows. He ordered a coffee from the barista and sat there feeling like an idiot because he didn't even know what this woman looked like. Denise, the matchmaker, had just said, "Her name's Alana, she's great. You'll know her when you see her," which was supremely unhelpful. 20 minutes went by, and Graham was starting to think he'd been stood up when his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. "I'm so sorry, last-minute client deadline came up, and I can't make it tonight. Can we reschedule for tomorrow, same time and place? I promise I'll be there." Graham felt this weird mix of relief and disappointment, typed back, "No problem, tomorrow works, see you then," and sat there for another minute finishing his coffee while trying to decide if he was actually going to show up tomorrow or use this as an exit ramp. He noticed through the window that there was a wall inside covered in kids' drawings, and he spotted one that looked suspiciously like Natalie's style. All bright colors and stick figures, and he remembered she'd done a drawing here a few weeks ago that the barista had hung up. He paid for his coffee and drove home, walked in to find Alana and Natalie in the middle of an intense coloring session at the kitchen table, and both of them looked up when he came in way earlier than expected. "You're back already? Is everything okay?" Alana asked, and Graham nodded. "Yeah, the date got canceled. Rescheduled for tomorrow, actually. But thanks for coming on short notice. You're really good with her." Natalie piped up with, "Daddy, Miss Alana knows how to draw horses and she taught me. Look," and showed him a picture that was definitely better than anything Natalie had drawn before. Graham paid Alana for the 2 hours, even though he'd only been gone 45 minutes because that felt like the right thing to do. And then he asked, "Hey, I know this is last minute, but any chance you're free tomorrow evening, same time? I'll need someone to watch Natalie again." Ilana's face did this apologetic thing, and she said, "I actually can't tomorrow night. I've got plans I can't move, but I'm free next week if you need someone then." Graham said that was fine and watched her pack up her stuff and head out. And after she left, Natalie announced, "I really like Miss Alana. She's the best babysitter we've ever had. You should have her come back all the time." Saturday afternoon, Graham was trying to figure out childcare logistics and coming up empty. His mom was still out of town. Paige had plans, and every other sitter on the app was booked. So he made the executive decision to just bring Natalie with him to the cafe because Rainline was super kid-friendly and she loved it there anyway. He texted Denise, the matchmaker, to give her a heads up. "Bringing my daughter to the date if that's okay. Couldn't find childcare." And Denise responded with, "Totally fine. Alana loves kids. See you at 5." Which made Graham feel slightly less like he was bombing this before it even started. At 4:45, he loaded Natalie into the car and drove to Rainline, and Natalie was bouncing with excitement because Graham had promised her the famous hot cocoa and a chance to see if her drawing was still on the wall. They got to the cafe right at 5 and grabbed the same covered patio table Graham had sat at yesterday, and the drizzle was still doing its thing, making everything look gray and moody in that very Seattle way. Natalie immediately wanted to go inside and check the art wall, so Graham told her to be careful and watched through the window as she found her drawing and pointed at it excitedly to show another kid who was looking at the wall. He was checking his phone to see if his date had confirmed when he heard a familiar voice say, "Graham? Natalie? What are you guys doing here?" And he looked up to see Alana walking up to the patio with this surprised smile on her face. "Oh, hey, Alana. We're just grabbing some cocoa. I'm actually waiting for someone, though. A blind date thing that got rescheduled from yesterday," Graham said, and Alana's eyebrows went up. "No way, that's so funny. I'm here for the exact same reason. Community center setup. My date's supposed to be here at 5. They both laughed at the coincidence, and Graham gestured to the empty chair. "Well, while we're both waiting, you might as well sit. Natalie will be thrilled to see you again." Alana sat down just as Natalie came running back outside and literally squealed, "Miss Alana, you're here. Are you having cocoa with us?" And Alana said, "I'm actually meeting someone, but I can hang out until they get here." And Natalie launched into a detailed explanation of finding her drawing on the wall. They sat there for about 10 minutes making small talk, both of them occasionally checking their phones. And Graham was thinking how weird it was that they were both here for blind dates at the same time and same place when Natalie suddenly looked at Alana with this very serious expression and said, "Miss Alana, are you my daddy's date? You're both here at the same time, and you both said you're meeting someone." Graham and Alana both froze, and Graham felt his stomach drop as he pulled out his phone to check the confirmation text from Denise, and Alana was doing the same thing, and they both looked at their screens and then at each other with slowly dawning horror and realization. "Your date is with someone named Alana?" Graham asked, and his voice came out weird. And Alana said, "Mine is with someone named Graham through the community center program." And they just stared at each other while Natalie looked between them like she'd just solved the world's greatest mystery. The barista chose that exact moment to come out to the patio with their orders and called out, "I've got a coffee for Graham and a chai for Alana." And both of them raised their hands automatically, and the barista set the drinks down looking completely oblivious to the absolute chaos happening at the table. Graham started laughing first, this disbelieving sound that turned into actual laughter, and Alana joined in. and Natalie just looked pleased with herself for figuring it out before the adults did. And Graham thought this might be the weirdest and most perfectly ridiculous way a date had ever started in the history of dating. After they stopped laughing about the absolute absurdity of the situation, Graham and Alana sat there at the rain-lined patio table with Natalie between them, happily drinking her hot cocoa. And there was this moment where they both realized they actually had to decide if they were going through with the date or just calling it the universe's weirdest practical joke and going home. Alana spoke first. So this is incredibly awkward. I babysat your daughter last night, and now I'm supposed to be on a date with you. How is this even real life? And Graham shook his head, still trying to process it. I have no idea, but Denise is probably going to call in like 5 minutes to ask how it's going, so we should probably figure out what we're telling her. Natalie was completely unbothered by the adult confusion and announced, I think you should do the date because Miss Alana is really nice and you're always saying you need more nice people in your life, Daddy. And both adults looked at this 5-year-old who'd apparently been listening to way too many of Graham's stress conversations. They decided to just go with it, figured they were already there, and the conversation had been flowing easily even before they knew they were supposed to be on a date. And Graham ordered Natalie some of those animal crackers the cafe kept behind the counter, while Alana got a refill on her chai. The actual date part ended up being surprisingly natural once they got past the weirdness. They talked about how they'd both ended up in Seattle. Alana had moved from Portland 5 years ago for a design job that ended up going under. So she went freelance, and Graham had been born and raised in the area and couldn't imagine living anywhere else, even though the rain drove him crazy sometimes. Natalie chimed in every few minutes with commentary about her kindergarten class or questions about whether Alana liked dinosaurs. And instead of being awkward, it actually made everything easier because there was no pressure to maintain constant adult conversation. By the time they left the cafe 2 hours later, Graham's face hurt from smiling. And when he buckled Natalie into her car seat, she said, So is Miss Alana your girlfriend now? And Graham had to explain that's not how dating works. But yes, he was definitely going to see her again. He texted Alana that night after Natalie was asleep. So that was the weirdest first date I've ever been on, but also somehow the best. Want to do it again without the accidental identity crisis? And Alana responded within seconds. Absolutely, but next time, let's make sure we know who we're meeting before we show up. They went on 3 more dates over the next 2 weeks. Coffee at a different spot downtown, a walk around Green Lake that turned into 4 hours of talking, and dinner at this hole-in-the-wall Thai place that Alana swore had the best curry in the city, and Graham found himself thinking about her constantly in a way that felt both exciting and terrifying. The problem started creeping in around week 3 when Graham was lying in bed one night, and his brain decided to latch on to the fact that Alana had been inside his house, had seen his whole life set up, had observed how he parented and what his daily routine looked like, all before she'd known she was going to be dating him. The thought wouldn't leave him alone, this nagging voice asking if she'd agreed to the second date, because she'd already vetted him as dad material, if she'd seen his stable job and nice house and decided he was a safe bet. He told himself he was being paranoid, but the thought stuck around anyway. Made worse when his mom, Linda, came back from her trip and Graham mentioned he was seeing someone. Linda had come over to watch Natalie one evening while Graham went to meet Alana for drinks. And when he got home, his mom was waiting in the kitchen with that expression that meant she had opinions she was about to share, whether Graham wanted to hear them or not. So Paige told me about this Alana girl, said she was your nanny first and then your date. Is that right? Linda asked while wiping down the counter that was already clean, and Graham felt defensive immediately. It wasn't like that. It was a complete accident. Neither of us knew until we were already sitting at the same table. Linda nodded, but her face said she wasn't entirely convinced. I'm just saying, honey, she got to see your whole life before you even went on a date. She saw you're a good dad with a steady job and a nice home. That's a lot of information to have going into something. Are you sure she's interested in you or just interested in what you can provide? That conversation planted a seed that Graham couldn't stop watering with his own anxiety. And it got worse when Alana mentioned she was looking for more nanny work because her design clients had been slow that month and she needed to make rent. Graham immediately offered, I could use regular help with Natalie. You're great with her. and she asks about you constantly. Let me hire you for a few evenings a week. And he'd meant it as a genuine solution, but Alana had looked at him like he'd suggested something inappropriate. Graham, I can't take money from you while we're dating. That would make me feel like I'm working for you and sleeping with you, and those two things should not overlap ever, she'd said, and her voice was firm in a way he hadn't heard before. Graham had tried to argue that it wasn't like that. He was just trying to help because she needed income and he needed childcare. But Alana had shut it down completely. I need to pay my own bills. I'm not going to be financially dependent on someone I'm dating. That's a line I won't cross. They'd left that conversation unresolved and things had been slightly tense ever since. And Graham could tell Alana was stressed about money, but too proud to accept help. And he was frustrated because he had the resources to make her life easier, but she wouldn't let him. His sister Paige hadn't helped when she'd said casually over lunch one day, "You know she got like a full preview of your life, right? She saw your house and your routine and how you are with Natalie before the date even happened. That's kind of an unfair advantage if you think about it." Paige hadn't meant anything bad by it. She was just making conversation. But it hit Graham's existing anxiety like gasoline on a fire, and suddenly he couldn't stop thinking about whether Alana's interest in him was genuine or calculated. He started pulling back without really meaning to, taking longer to respond to texts, making excuses about being busy with work when Alana suggested getting together, and he could tell she noticed because her messages went from frequent and easy to cautious and questioning. One night she called him instead of texting, and her voice was careful when she asked, "Is everything okay? You've been really distant this week, and I don't know if I did something wrong or if you're just stressed about work." Graham had wanted to be honest, to tell her about the thoughts spiraling in his head, but instead he just said he was fine, and they'd ended the call with this awkward tension that felt like the beginning of the end. The actual fight happened on a Saturday afternoon when Alana showed up at his house unannounced, and Graham opened the door to find her standing there, looking determined and slightly angry. "We need to talk because I'm not doing this weird avoidance thing. If you want to break up, just say it, but don't make me guess what I did wrong," she said before Graham could even say hello. And he let her in while Natalie was thankfully at a play date so they could actually have this conversation. They sat in his living room and Graham tried to explain without sounding like a complete jerk. "I keep thinking about how you saw my whole life before we went on that date. You were in my house. You saw I had a stable job and was a decent dad, and I can't stop wondering if that influenced your decision to keep seeing me." Alana's face went from concern to hurt to angry in about 3 seconds. "You think I'm that shallow? You think I calculated this? Like I saw your nice house and decided you were a good investment?" Graham tried to backtrack, but the words were already out there. "I'm not saying you did it consciously. I'm just saying the timing was weird. You had information about me that most people don't get until months into dating." Alana stood up and her voice was shaking. "You want to know what I saw when I nannied for you? I saw a dad who was trying really hard, who had drawings on the fridge and toys everywhere, who apologized for the mess even though it was just normal life. I didn't see a bank account or a meal ticket. I saw a person, but clearly you don't think I'm capable of that kind of basic decency." Graham tried to explain himself better, but Alana was already grabbing her jacket. "You know what the worst part is? I was falling for you, like really falling, and you've been sitting here analyzing whether I'm using you. If you can't trust me, then we don't have anything." She walked to the door and turned back. "For the record, I agreed to that blind date before I ever met you. I said yes to Denise based on a questionnaire and her saying you seemed kind. I didn't know you were Graham the dad I'd babysat for until we were sitting at that table, but believe whatever you want." She left before Graham could respond, and he stood in his empty living room, feeling like he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, but not knowing how to fix it. A week went by with zero contact, and Graham was absolutely miserable. Going through the motions at work and coming home to Natalie, who kept asking where Alana was and why she didn't come over anymore. He'd been short with his mom, avoided Paige's calls, and spent his evenings staring at his phone, wanting to text Alana but not knowing what to say. And the whole thing felt like he'd sabotaged something good because he was too scared to just trust that someone could want him without ulterior motives. Graham spent an entire week feeling like he'd voluntarily thrown away the best thing that had happened to him in 3 years. And the worst part wasn't even his own misery. It was watching Natalie's face fall every time she asked, "When is Miss Alana coming over?" And he had to make up another excuse about everyone being busy. His mom Linda came by on Thursday to watch Natalie while Graham worked late, and when he got home she was waiting in the kitchen with that look that meant she'd been thinking, and he wasn't going to like what came next. "Natalie told me you and Alana had a fight. She said you made Alana sad, and that's why she doesn't come over anymore. Do you want to tell me what happened, or should I just assume you did something stupid?" Linda asked while loading the dishwasher. And Graham felt 5 years old again, getting lectured for breaking something valuable. He ended up telling his mom the whole story about his fears that Alana had chosen him based on seeing his life set up first, about the money thing, about how he'd basically accused her of being calculated when really she'd just been living her life and ended up in a weird coincidence. Linda listened to the whole thing without interrupting and then turned off the sink and looked at him with an expression somewhere between disappointed and sympathetic. "Graham, honey, your wife died and it broke something in you, I get that. But you can't spend the rest of your life assuming everyone has an angle. Sometimes people are just genuinely kind, and sometimes timing is just weird. That doesn't make it suspicious." Graham knew she was right, but knowing it and fixing it were two completely different problems, and he had no idea how to bridge the gap between where he was now and where Alana was, which felt like opposite sides of the planet. Friday afternoon, Graham was sitting in his truck on his lunch break staring at his phone, and he'd opened and closed his text thread with Alana about 6 times without actually typing anything, because every possible message sounded either pathetic or defensive. He ended up calling Denise the matchmaker instead, figuring he should at least let her know the setup had imploded so she could stop asking how things were going. And when Denise answered, she sounded genuinely happy to hear from him, which made what he had to say feel even worse. "Hey Denise, I just wanted to let you know I'm withdrawing from the program. The match with Alana didn't work out, and I don't think I'm in a good place to date right now," Graham said while watching rain hit his windshield. And Denise made this confused sound on the other end. "Wait, what happened? You guys seemed perfect for each other. She called me after your first date and wouldn't stop talking about how great it went even with the weird nanny coincidence," Denise said, and Graham felt his chest tighten because knowing Alana had been excited about him made this so much worse. He gave Denise the abbreviated version, left out the parts that made him look like a complete jerk, and Denise was quiet for a second before she said something that made Graham's entire world tilt sideways. "Hold on, Graham. You know I matched you two on Wednesday afternoon, right? Alana confirmed she wanted to meet you Thursday morning. I have the timestamp on the email. When did you hire her to nanny?" Graham's brain went completely blank for a second. "I booked her Thursday afternoon around 3. Why does that matter?" And Denise's voice got softer. "Because she agreed to go on a blind date with you a full day before she ever met you or Natalie. She had no idea who you were when she said yes." Graham sat in his truck feeling like he'd been punched in the stomach, asked Denise to send him the confirmation emails with timestamps, and stared at his phone screen when they came through showing Alana's acceptance, sent Thursday at 9:47 a.m., and his nanny booking confirmation sent Thursday at 3:12 p.m. She'd said yes to the date more than 5 hours before she'd ever walked into his house, before she'd seen his job or his life, or anything about him except what was on a compatibility questionnaire. And he'd accused her of calculating the whole thing when the timeline proved she literally couldn't have. He texted Alana before he could overthink it, just a simple, "Can you meet me at Rainline tonight at 6? I need to say something, please." And then sat there for the longest 3 minutes of his life until she responded with, "Fine, but this better be good." Graham got to Rainline at 5:45 and grabbed their usual table on the covered patio, even though the Seattle drizzle had upgraded to actual rain, and he sat there rehearsing what he was going to say while watching people rush past with umbrellas. Alana showed up right at 6 looking guarded and tired, and she sat down across from him without ordering anything, which felt like a bad sign. "You said you needed to say something, so say it. I've got plans later," she said, and her voice was cool in a way that hurt. And Graham pulled out his phone and slid it across the table showing the email timestamps. "I called Denise today to withdraw from the program, and she told me you confirmed our date Wednesday. I didn't hire you until Thursday afternoon. You said yes before you ever met me." Alana looked at the screen and then back at him with this expression that was half vindicated and half still angry. Yeah, I know. I told you that. When I left your house, but you didn't believe me, why does it matter now? Graham felt his throat get tight. It matters because I've spent the past week thinking you made some calculated decision based on seeing my life. And the whole time the proof that you didn't was sitting in an email. I never bothered to check. I'm an idiot, Alana. A complete idiot. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. You accused me of using you, of seeing your house and your job and deciding you were a safe bet. Do you have any idea how much that hurt? I thought you saw me as someone who actually cared about you, not someone running some long con for financial security. Graham reached across the table but didn't quite touch her hand. I know, and I'm so sorry. I've been scared of everything since my wife died. Scared to trust people. Scared to believe someone could want me for just me. And when my mom and sister started planting seeds about the timing being weird, I let it completely take over my brain instead of just asking you directly. Alana's expression softened just slightly. You could have just talked to me. You could have said, hey, this timing feels weird. Can we talk about it? Instead, you pulled away and made me feel like I'd done something wrong when I'd just been living my life. Graham nodded. You're right. I should have communicated instead of spiraling. I'm not good at this. I haven't dated anyone seriously since before my wife got sick, and I don't know how to do the vulnerable, honest thing. But I want to learn, if you'll let me. They sat in silence for a minute with just the sound of rain on the patio covering. And finally, Alana said, I didn't agree to that date because of your job or your house. I agreed because Denise said you were kind and funny and a good dad, and those were the things that mattered. When I showed up at your house to nanny, I had no idea it was you. And when I realized at the cafe, I was just as freaked out as you were. Graham felt tears burning behind his eyes, which was mortifying in public, but he couldn't stop them. I know that now, and I'm sorry I didn't trust it from the beginning. I'm sorry I let my fear mess up something that was actually really good. I miss you, Alana. Natalie misses you. We both want you back if that's still an option. Alana was quiet for what felt like an eternity, and then she said something that broke Graham's heart and put it back together in the same breath. I was falling in love with you, Graham. Like actual love, not just dating. And you looked at me like I was some kind of opportunist. I can't go back to that. I need to know if things get hard again, you'll talk to me instead of assuming the worst. Graham reached across the table for real this time and took her hand. I promise, no more spiraling alone. No more letting other people's opinions override what I actually know about you. I'll mess up probably because I'm a work in progress, but I'll mess up while communicating, not while hiding. Alana smiled for the first time since sitting down. That's all I'm asking for, honesty even when it's messy. And Graham felt like he could breathe again for the first time in a week. 4 months later, Graham walked into Rainline on a Saturday afternoon with Natalie bouncing beside him, and they'd turned this into their weekend tradition, cocoa and muffins, while Natalie worked on drawings that the cafe had started featuring on a dedicated kids' wall. Alana was already there at their usual patio table, even though the rain was doing its thing, and she'd brought her laptop to work on a design project while they hung out. And this was what their life looked like now, comfortable and ordinary, and exactly what Graham had been too scared to believe he could have. Natalie ran inside to grab supplies from the craft basket the cafe kept for kids, and Graham sat down across from Alana, who looked up and smiled. Your daughter just asked me if I'm moving in soon. I told her that's a conversation for adults, but she said you already asked her, and she said yes. Graham felt his face get hot. I was going to ask you properly tonight. I had a whole plan. Natalie wasn't supposed to blow the surprise. And Alana laughed. So you did ask a 5-year-old for permission before asking me? Graham nodded. She lives there too. Her opinion matters. Plus, she threatened to be mad at me forever if I didn't make it official with you. Her words, not mine. Alana reached across the table and took his hand. Well, for the record, my answer is yes. I'd love to move in, but you're helping me pack because I have way too many books and art supplies. Natalie came running back outside and noticed them holding hands. Does this mean Miss Alana is staying forever? Because I made her a drawing for her room, and she held up a piece of paper with 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. The barista came out to grab their empty mugs and said, "I'm hanging this one up front. Natalie, this might be your best work yet." And Natalie beamed with pride while the barista took the drawing inside. Graham watched through the window as it went up on the kids' wall, right next to the entrance. This simple drawing of their weird little family that had started with the most ridiculous coincidence and turned into something real. Alana squeezed his hand and said, "Remember when you hired me to watch Natalie so you could go on a date with a stranger? And it turned out I was the stranger?" And Graham laughed. "I still can't believe we didn't figure it out until we were sitting at the same table. The universe has a weird sense of humor." Natalie announced she was going to make another drawing, this time of their house with all three of them in it. And Graham thought about how close he'd come to ruining this by letting fear override trust. Sometimes the right person shows up in your life in the wrong order, and it takes a minute to realize that the timing isn't wrong. It's actually perfect. You just couldn't see it yet because you were too busy protecting yourself from getting hurt. Graham had hired a nanny and met his future without knowing they were the same person, and then he'd almost lost her by questioning whether someone could genuinely want him without ulterior motives. But Alana had been patient enough to let him figure out that love doesn't follow a logical order, and sometimes the best things happen when you stop trying to control the narrative and just let it unfold. If this story reminded you that trust is a choice you make every day, and that the right person will show up even when you're not looking for them in the right places, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and whether you believe in coincidences or fate. We love hearing your stories. Thanks for being here with us. And remember that sometimes the person you hire to watch your kid ends up being the person who watches your heart. And that's exactly how it was supposed to happen all along.